Welcome to Today's Deep Dive, where we're going to be tackling, pretty major period, the Age of Revolutions.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, so we're going to be focusing specifically on the American, French, and Haitian Revolutions.
Okay.
And using some excerpts from a history text on the period.
Great.
Get ready to uncover, I think, some surprising connections, challenge some assumptions, and really just get a deeper understanding of how all these things are intertwined and how they shape the world we live in today.
It's truly fascinating. These revolutions weren't just these isolated incidents. They actually formed a sort of chain reaction, each one shaping the others in really profound ways.
Yeah, like a domino effect.
Exactly.
One revolution sparks another, and the ideas spread like wildfire across continents.
Totally.
So to really grasp the impact, I think we first need to understand the intellectual foundation.
Okay.
The groundwork that led to these radical shifts. Our source material points to the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, and the Enlightenment as these kind of key movements that set the stage.
Absolutely. These movements challenged the very core of traditional authority.
Yeah.
For real. For centuries, the idea of questioning a king was just unthinkable.
Unthinkable.
But then along came thinkers like John Locke and Montesquieu who dared to challenge these norms.
Right.
They argued for things like natural rights and the separation of powers.
Okay. Yeah.
Suggesting that power shouldn't reside just in the hands of a monarch, but should be distributed with checks and balances to prevent tyranny.
So these weren't just like, abstract philosophical ideas. They had a direct and a tangible impact on how people viewed, governance.
Oh, totally.
Like, is it safe to say that their writings really planted the seeds for a revolution?
Yeah, for sure.
By giving people a framework for demanding more rights and a say in how they were governed.
Exactly. These ideas resonated deeply with people who felt oppressed or marginalized under the existing power structures, and nowhere was this more apparent than in the American colonies. Yeah.
Let's cross the Atlantic then and delve into the American Revolution. Now, Britain had just emerged victorious from the 7 Years' War, a massive conflict, and you'd think they'd be in a celebratory mood.
You'd think so, right?
But it seems like this victory came with a hefty price tag.
Indeed, the war left Britain deeply in debt, and they were grappling with the immense cost of maintaining their vast empire.
Yeah.
This led them to seek tighter control over the colonies, including increasing taxes to replenish their coffers.
So, enter the infamous Stamp Act.
Yes.
From what I understand, this wasn't just about a few extra pennies. This act really ignited a firestorm of resentment in the colonies. So what made this particular act such a flashpoint?
Well, the Stamp Act was seen by many colonists as a direct attack on their liberties. You see, they had grown accustomed to a degree of self-governance and local control. And this act, imposed without their consent, violated the very principle of no taxation without representation.
Right.
A core tenet of their understanding of just governance.
So it was less about the financial burden and more about the principle of the matter.
Exactly.
The right to have a voice in decisions that directly affected them.
Right.
This sounds like a real clash of perspectives between the British Parliament and the American colonists.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The British Parliament viewed itself as the supreme authority over the entire empire, including the colonies. They believed they had the right to tax and legislate for the colonies without direct colonial representation in Parliament.
But the colonists saw it differently.
Oh, very much so.
They felt that their rights as Englishmen were being violated.
Yes.
And they weren't going to back down without a fight.
And they made that very clear.
So this clash of ideologies fueled a growing resistance movement in the colonies. Things like boycotts of British goods, fiery speeches, acts of defiance like the Boston Tea Party became increasingly common.
Yes, they were making a statement.
It's like they were saying, you know what, we're not going to be treated as second-class citizens.
Exactly.
So this tension ultimately culminated in the Second Continental Congress.
Right.
I mean, things must have reached a boiling point for the colonists to take such a drastic step.
Absolutely.
So what was the final straw?
Well, reconciliation seemed impossible at that point. Armed conflict had already broken out at Lexington and Concord.
Right.
And the British government showed no signs of backing down.
Oh, wow.
The colonists realized that to secure their liberties and establish a government that truly represented their interests, they had no choice but to sever ties with Britain.
And that brings us to one of the most iconic documents in history.
For sure.
The Declaration of Independence. I mean, it's amazing to think about Thomas Jefferson hunched over his desk, drafting those powerful words about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It was a bold and revolutionary document.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just a list of grievances.
Yeah.
It was a profound articulation of Enlightenment ideals.
Right.
And a justification for the colony's right to self-determination.
Yeah.
It resonated far beyond the shores of America, inspiring revolutionary movements around the world.
But declaring independence is one thing.
Yes.
Actually winning the war against the mighty British Empire is another challenge altogether.
Oh, absolutely.
So from what I've read, it seems like the colonists had a few factors working in their favor, including a certain strategic alliance.
You're talking about the French, of course.
Oh, yeah, the French.
Their support played a crucial role in the American victory.
Yeah.
The French, eager to weaken their old rival, Britain,
Right.
provided the colonists with much-needed military and financial aid.
So it wasn't just a matter of, patriotic spirit and determination.
Yeah.
Like a bit of international rivalry helped tip the scales in favor of the Americans.
Absolutely. These global power dynamics were definitely at play.
Fascinating.
Uh-huh.
And so with George Washington's leadership and French support,
Yes.
the colonists managed to secure that hard-fought victory at Yorktown, forcing the British to recognize American independence.
It was a turning point.
And so a new nation was born.
Yes.
Founded on those revolutionary principles of checks and balances, separation of powers, and the Bill of Rights, a remarkable achievement.
A new era.
However, there's a shadow that hangs over this triumph, a glaring contradiction that we can't ignore.
You're referring to the continued existence of slavery.
Yes, the very institution that stood in stark opposition to the ideals of liberty and equality that the nation was founded upon.
Sobering reminder.
Yeah, it's a sobering reminder that the fight for freedom and equality is an ongoing process, a constant struggle that transcends time and place.
Yes.
It forces us to confront the complexities of history and acknowledge that even revolutions,
Right.
as transformative as they may be, don't always erase deep-seated injustices overnight.
Indeed, it's a reminder that we must constantly strive to live up to those ideals, to challenge systems of oppression, and to work towards a more just and equitable society.
Okay, so while the American Revolution was unfolding across the Atlantic, another revolution was brewing, one that would shake the very foundations of French society.
Ooh.
Let's delve into that next.
Okay.
I've heard that the French Revolution was a truly dramatic and tumultuous period,
Oh, it was?
marked by radical shifts in power and just, social upheaval.
A whirlwind of events, from the storming of the Bastille to the Reign of Terror and ultimately the rise of Napoleon.
Wow.
A story of societal transformation, both inspiring and cautionary in its implications.
Okay, before we get into the events themselves, I think it's important to paint a picture of French society at the time.
Okay.
I understand that it was a highly stratified system with vast inequalities between the different social classes.
Yeah, you're right. French society was divided into three estates.
Okay.
The clergy, the nobility, and the commoners who made up the third estate.
Okay, so three very distinct groups.
Yes, and the first two estates, despite representing a tiny fraction of the population, enjoyed immense privileges.
Like what?
They were exempt from most taxes and had a disproportionate influence in government.
So the vast majority of the population, the third estate, they bore the brunt of the tax burden while having very little say in how they were governed.
Exactly.
Sounds like a recipe for discontent.
It was, and to add fuel to the fire, France was grappling with a severe economic crisis.
Oh, no.
Years of extravagant spending by the monarchy,
Yeah.
coupled with costly wars and inefficient tax collection,
Yeah.
had left the treasury depleted.
Yikes.
Inflation was soaring, food prices were skyrocketing, and the people were struggling to make ends meet.
Wow. So it's almost like all these factors were converging to create this perfect storm.
Yeah, a real powder keg.
Enter King Louis VI.
Oh, yes.
How did he handle this volatile situation?
Well, to put it mildly, King Louis VI wasn't exactly known for his decisiveness or political acumen.
Boy.
Faced with mounting pressure, he reluctantly agreed to convene the Estates General,
Okay.
a representative assembly that hadn't been called in over a century.
Wow. So this was a big deal.
The idea was to address the financial crisis and propose reforms. However, what was intended as a controlled attempt to appease the populace quickly spiraled out of control.
It sounds like the king underestimated the level of discontent and the power of the ideas that were circulating at the time.
He did.
Was it the third estate that ultimately pushed events towards revolution?
Yes, the third estate, emboldened by Enlightenment ideals and acutely aware of their marginalized position,
Right.
refused to accept the traditional voting system that gave the clergy and nobility an unfair advantage. They demanded a more equitable system where each delegate had an equal vote regardless of their estate.
So this was a direct challenge to the existing power structure, a rejection of the privileges that had defined French society for centuries.
Absolutely.
What was the king's reaction to this defiance?
He resisted, of course.
Oh, boy.
He attempted to shut down the National Assembly, which further inflamed tensions.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the people of Paris, suffering from economic hardship and inspired by the actions of the National Assembly,
Right.
took matters into their own hands.
This brings us to one of the most iconic events of the French Revolution,
Oh, yes.
the storming of the Bastille on July 14th, 1789.
Such a symbolic moment.
It's almost impossible to imagine the energy and chaos of that day.
It was electric.
Can you describe what happened?
Well, imagine a crowd of Parisians, fueled by anger and a desperate hope for change, surging towards the Bastille,
Okay.
a symbol of royal authority and oppression.
Right.
The prison held only a handful of prisoners, but its symbolic significance was immense.
I see.
The storming of the Bastille marked a turning point, a moment when the people demonstrated their willingness to confront the monarchy and take control of their destiny.
It's like this act of defiance shattered the aura of invincibility that surrounded the monarchy.
Exactly.
It sent a clear message.
It did.
The people would no longer tolerate tyranny and demanded a say in their governance.
Right.
It seems like a symbolic start to a revolution that would forever change the face of France.
You're absolutely right. The storming of the Bastille became a rallying cry for revolutionaries across France, inspiring similar uprisings.
Right.
And marking the beginning of a period of radical transformation, it's celebrated to this day as Bastille Day, France's national holiday,
Okay.
commemorating the spirit of liberty, equality, and popular sovereignty.
Wow. It's incredible to think about how that one event
Yeah,
really sparked, such a monumental shift.
it was a catalyst for change.
So this early stage of the revolution seems marked by this sense of hope and the promise of a more just and equitable society.
It was a time of great optimism.
So what were some of the key reforms that were implemented during this period?
Well, the National Assembly, now in control, moved swiftly to abolish feudal privileges, dismantle the old system of taxation, and draft the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen,
Okay.
a document that proclaimed the fundamental rights of all men, including liberty, equality, and fraternity. It was a remarkable achievement, a bold step towards creating a society based on merit and individual rights, rather than inherited privilege.
Yeah, those are ideas that continue to resonate today, fundamental principles that underpin many modern democracies.
Absolutely.
But amidst this wave of revolutionary fervor, did any voices emerge to challenge the limitations of these declarations, particularly in regard to the rights of women?
Yes, absolutely. One remarkable figure who dared to speak out during this tumultuous time was Olympe de Gouges.
Olympe de Gouges.
She recognized the hypocrisy of proclaiming equality and liberty for all men,
Yeah.
while excluding women from these fundamental rights. She penned the Declaration of the Rights of Women and the Female Citizen,
Okay.
a powerful document that demanded equal rights for women in all aspects of society, including education, property ownership, and political participation.
It's astonishing to think about her courage and foresight, advocating for women's rights during such a chaotic and volatile period.
She was a true trailblazer.
Did her voice resonate with the revolutionaries? Was she able to bring about any meaningful change for women during this time?
Sadly, no. Olympe de Gouges' pleas for equality largely fell on deaf ears.
Oh.
The revolutionaries, while embracing radical change in many areas, remained deeply entrenched in patriarchal views.
Wow.
They saw women's primary role as wives and mothers confined to the domestic sphere.
It's a stark reminder that even amidst revolutions, progress can be uneven.
Yes.
And deeply ingrained societal norms can be resistant to change.
It's true.
It makes you wonder what might have been if her ideas had been embraced at the time.
It's a fascinating thought experiment.
Yeah?
The French Revolution, despite its many achievements, failed to fully address the issue of gender equality. And tragically, Olympe de Gouges paid the ultimate price for her outspokenness.
Oh, no.
She was branded a counter-revolutionary and executed during the Reign of Terror.
Wow, her story is both inspiring and heartbreaking.
It is.
She serves as a powerful reminder that the fight for equality requires unwavering courage, and that the path to a truly just society is often long and fraught with obstacles.
Her legacy, however, continues to inspire feminist movements around the world.
Yeah.
Her writings serve as a testament to the enduring power of ideas and the importance of challenging injustice even when faced with overwhelming opposition.
It's incredible.
It is.
So her story, I think, highlights a darker side of the French Revolution.
Right.
The Reign of Terror, it seems like the revolution took a sinister turn.
It did.
Marked by violence, fear, and paranoia. So how did this period come about, and what were its defining features?
Well, as the revolution progressed, France faced internal divisions and external threats.
Okay.
Fear of counter-revolutionary plots and foreign invasion led to a climate of suspicion and paranoia.
Right.
The Committee of Public Safety, led by Maximilien Robespierre, rose to power, promising to safeguard the revolution and eliminate its enemies.
It sounds like a classic case of power corrupting and absolute power corrupting. Absolutely.
Yeah, you could say that.
Did this committee become the very embodiment of tyranny that the revolution had initially thought to overthrow?
In a way, yes.
Wow.
The Reign of Terror, as it came to be known, was a brutal period characterized by mass executions, often without fair trials.
Oh, wow.
Anyone suspected of opposing the revolution, even those who had initially supported it, could be denounced and sent to the guillotine.
The guillotine, a chilling symbol of that era, represents the swift and merciless nature of the terror.
It does.
It's almost unimaginable to think about the scale of violence.
It was dark time.
And the fear that must have gripped the nation during this time.
It was a period of excess and brutality that ultimately consumed itself.
Wow.
Robespierre, once hailed as a champion of the people, became a tyrant in the eyes of many.
It's crazy how things can change so quickly.
It is.
So he was eventually overthrown and executed, marking the end of the Reign of Terror.
Right.
So it seems like the revolution, in its attempt to create this new and just society, descended into a spiral of violence and paranoia.
Yeah, a cautionary tale.
Did the end of the terror bring stability to France? Or was the nation still grappling with turmoil and uncertainty?
While the Reign of Terror ended, France remained deeply divided and unstable. The country was still at war with several European powers, and its economy was in shambles.
Oh, wow.
It was during this period of uncertainty and turmoil that a new figure emerged.
Okay.
A charismatic military leader who would ultimately shape the destiny of France and much of Europe.
Oh, who are we talking about?
Napoleon Bonaparte.
Napoleon.
Yes.
It seems like the stage is set for another dramatic chapter in this tumultuous period.
It is.
The rise of Napoleon, a figure shrouded in both glory and controversy, marks a turning point in French history.
He's a fascinating character.
He is. But before we dive into his impact, I think we need to understand how he rose to power from the ashes of the revolution.
Yeah, his story is an incredible one, filled with ambition, military genius, and a complex legacy that continues to be debated to this day.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've explored the intellectual currents that laid the groundwork for revolution.
Yes.
Witnessed the birth of a new nation in America, and delved into the complexities and contradictions of the French Revolution.
It's been a whirlwind tour.
It has. It's been a journey through radical ideas, dramatic events, and the enduring struggle for liberty and equality.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right?
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore Napoleon's rise to power, the Haitian Revolution's extraordinary struggle for freedom, and the ripple effects of these revolutions across Latin America.
Yeah, it's incredible to think how these seemingly disparate events were intertwined, shaping each other and leaving a profound legacy that continues to influence our world today.
It's all connected.
So join us for part 2 as we continue to unpack this pivotal period in history.
It's going to be an exciting ride.
It is.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Age of Revolutions. Last time we left off with France in a state of turmoil, really ripe for the rise of a strong leader.
Yeah, and boy, did they get one Napoleon Bonaparte, am I right? What I find fascinating about him is he's both a product of the French Revolution and someone who ultimately put an end to it, at least in its most radical form.
That's a great point. Napoleon was a brilliant military strategist. He rose through the ranks during the chaotic latter years of the revolution. He capitalized on that instability, and that yearning for order that was so prevalent at the time. He staged a coup in 1799 and established himself as first consul.
So he basically used the very instability that the revolution created to seize power. It's almost ironic, don't you think?
It certainly highlights the cyclical nature of power. The French people were exhausted by years of upheaval. They were willing to accept a strong leader who promised stability and a return to normalcy, even if it meant sacrificing some of the freedoms they had fought for.
And Napoleon delivered on that promise of stability, at least initially, right? I've heard about his Napoleonic Code and the reforms he implemented.
Yes, he consolidated many of the revolution's gains, creating a more centralized and efficient government. The Napoleonic Code in particular had a lasting impact, standardizing laws across France and promoting principles like equality before the law, protection of property rights. It's fascinating how this code influenced legal systems throughout Europe and even parts of the Americas.
So in a way, he brought order out of chaos. But he wasn't just a reformer. He was also a conqueror, right? I remember learning about his vast empire and the Napoleonic Wars that engulfed Europe for years.
That's right. Napoleon's ambition knew no bounds. Driven by a desire for glory and a belief in his own destiny, he launched a series of military campaigns conquering much of Europe and installing his relatives as rulers in several countries.
Talk about a power move.
Yeah.
But it seems his ambition ultimately led to his downfall. I'm particularly interested in his invasion of Russia in 1812. That's always stood out to me as a turning point in his career.
Ah, yes, the Russian campaign. It was a disastrous miscalculation that proved to be Napoleon's undoing. He led his Grand Armée, hundreds of thousands strong, deep into Russia, hoping for a decisive victory. But he underestimated the vastness of the Russian landscape, the harshness of the winter, and the resilience of the Russian people.
It sounds like something out of a Tolstoy novel, an epic clash of armies against the backdrop of a brutal winter.
It was. The Russians, employing a scorched earth policy, retreated eastward, burning crops and villages as they went, denying Napoleon's army supplies. The winter set in, and the Grande Armée, decimated by cold, hunger, and disease, was forced to retreat in disarray. It was a humiliating defeat that shattered Napoleon's aura of invincibility.
It's almost Shakespearean, a tragic fall from grace for a man who had seemed unstoppable.
No.
What happened after his defeat in Russia?
He was forced to abdicate in 1814 and exiled to the island of Elba. However, in a dramatic twist, he escaped from Elba and returned to France, rallying his supporters and briefly regaining power. This period, known as 100 Days, ended with his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815.
So the comeback kid's reign was short-lived. What happened to Napoleon after Waterloo?
He was exiled once again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he died in 1821.
It's amazing to think about the impact of this one man on the course of history. He was a product of the French Revolution, but he also shaped its legacy, putting an end to its most radical phase and ushering in a new era in European politics.
Absolutely. His conquests spread the ideas of the French Revolution throughout Europe, challenging traditional power structures and contributing to the rise of nationalism. His legal reforms had a lasting impact, and his military genius continues to be studied to this day. Napoleon, despite his flaws and ambitions, remains a fascinating and controversial figure who left an indelible mark on history.
So while Napoleon was reshaping the map of Europe, another revolution was unfolding across the Atlantic, one that challenged the very foundations of the colonial system. Let's shift our focus now to the Haitian Revolution, a story of incredible courage, resilience, and ultimately triumph over seemingly insurmountable odds.
It's a story that often gets overshadowed by the American and French revolutions, but it's just as significant, perhaps even more so, in its implications for human rights and the fight against slavery.
From what I've read, Saint-Domingue, as Haiti was known then, was a French colony and the world's leading producer of sugar and coffee. It generated immense wealth for France, but this prosperity came at a terrible human cost.
Exactly. Saint-Domingue's economy was built on a brutal system of plantation slavery. Enslaved Africans brought from across the Atlantic endured horrific conditions, forced to work tirelessly in the fields to produce sugar, coffee, and other commodities that fueled European markets.
It's almost unimaginable the scale of human suffering that underpinned this economic system. It seems like the social hierarchy in Saint-Domingue was incredibly complex, with various groups vying for power and influence.
You're right. It was a society deeply divided along racial and class lines. At the top were the Grand Blancs, the wealthy white plantation owners who held most of the political and economic power. Below them were the Petit Blancs, lower-class whites, who resented the dominance of the Grand Blancs but still benefited from the system of white supremacy.
So it seems like even within the white population there were tensions and divisions. What about the free people of color? Where do they fit into this social hierarchy?
Ah, yes, the free people of color. This group, often of mixed race, occupied a precarious position in Saint-Domingue. They were technically free, but they faced discrimination and were denied many of the rights and privileges enjoyed by whites. Many of them were successful merchants and landowners, and they resented the limitations placed upon them.
It sounds like a powder keg with all these groups harboring grievances and competing for power. What was the spark that ignited the revolution?
As news of the French Revolution reached Saint-Domingue, it spread like wildfire among the enslaved population. The ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity resonated deeply with those who yearned for freedom from bondage. The Declaration of the Rights of Man, while intended for French citizens, gave them hope that their own humanity might finally be recognized.
So the French Revolution, while occurring thousands of miles away, had a profound impact on Saint-Domingue. It planted the seeds for a slave revolt that would challenge the very foundations of the colonial system.
Precisely. In August 1791, a massive slave uprising erupted, led by charismatic figures like Toussaint Louverture, a former slave who had gained his freedom and risen to a position of leadership. This revolt, unprecedented in its scale and ferocity, caught the white colonists completely off guard.
It's incredible to think about the courage and determination it must have taken for the enslaved people to rise up against their oppressors, knowing the risks they faced. Can you tell us more about Toussaint Louverture and his role in the Haitian Revolution?
Toussaint Louverture was a brilliant military strategist and a shrewd political leader. He united disparate rebel groups, forging them into a formidable fighting force. He was also a skilled negotiator, playing the French, British, and Spanish against each other to advance the cause of Haitian independence.
So he wasn't just a military leader. He was a master of diplomacy, navigating the complex geopolitical landscape to secure advantages for his people. It seems like the Haitian Revolution wasn't just a fight for freedom, it was a struggle for survival against multiple colonial powers.
You're absolutely right. The Haitian revolutionaries faced not only the French, but also British and Spanish forces, who saw an opportunity to seize control of the colony. It was a brutal conflict with atrocities committed on all sides. But the Haitian revolutionaries, fueled by a desire for freedom and a determination to create a new society based on equality, persevered against all odds.
Their victory is all the more remarkable considering the challenges they faced. I've heard that Haiti faced considerable opposition from France even after the revolution. Can you tell us more about the obstacles they encountered in establishing their independence?
Yes, France was initially reluctant to acknowledge Haiti's independence. They sent a large expeditionary force led by Napoleon's brother-in-law to try to retake control of the colony. However, the Haitian revolutionaries, under the leadership of Jean-Jacques Dessalines, fought fiercely and ultimately defeated the French forces.
So despite their victory on the battlefield, it seems like Haiti's struggle for recognition and acceptance was far from over. What happened after the French were defeated?
In 1804, Dessalines declared Haiti an independent republic, the first black-led nation in the Western Hemisphere, and the second republic in the Americas after the United States. This was a momentous achievement, a beacon of hope for enslaved people throughout the world. However, Haiti's independence came at a steep price.
What do you mean by a steep price?
France, unwilling to accept the loss of its most valuable colony, demanded a massive indemnity payment from Haiti in exchange for recognizing its independence and lifting its trade embargo. This crippling debt, along with the devastation caused by years of warfare and the loss of skilled labor, would plague Haiti for generations, hindering its economic development and contributing to its political instability.
It's a tragic irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
The very nation that struck a blow against slavery and colonialism was forced to pay for its freedom, a burden that would have long-lasting consequences for its people.
It's a stark reminder that even after achieving independence, former colonies often face enormous challenges in overcoming the legacies of colonialism, including economic exploitation and political marginalization. Haiti's story, while triumphant in its fight for freedom, also serves as a cautionary tale about the enduring impact of colonial power structures.
While the Haitian Revolution marked a turning point in the fight against slavery, its impact extended far beyond the Caribbean. I understand that it also had significant repercussions for the transatlantic slave trade and the expansion of slavery in other parts of the Americas.
You're right. The Haitian Revolution sent shockwaves throughout the slaveholding world. It inspired rebellions and uprisings in other colonies, striking fear in the hearts of slave owners who recognized the potential for similar revolts on their own plantations.
So while Haiti's victory represented a beacon of hope for enslaved people, it also heightened anxieties and led to increased repression in other parts of the Americas. It seems like a classic case of unintended consequences.
It is, and it also had economic ramifications. The loss of Saint-Domingue as a major sugar producer forced European powers to look elsewhere for their supply. This led to the intensification of slavery in other parts of the Caribbean, particularly Cuba, where sugar production increased dramatically to meet the demand.
So in a way, the Haitian Revolution, while striking a blow against slavery in one part of the world, inadvertently contributed to its growth in another. It's a complex and tragic legacy, highlighting the interconnectedness of historical events.
You've hit on a crucial point. History is rarely straightforward. Actions have ripple effects, often unintended and unforeseen. The Haitian Revolution, while a monumental achievement in the fight for freedom, also illustrates how even the most well-intentioned acts can have complex and multifaceted consequences.
The Haitian Revolution, with its triumphs and its complexities, serves as a powerful reminder that the fight for justice and equality is an ongoing process. It requires constant vigilance, a willingness to challenge systems of oppression, and a recognition that the legacies of the past continue to shape our world today.
We've covered a lot of ground in this section, from the rise and fall of Napoleon to the extraordinary struggle for freedom in Haiti. It's been a journey through military conquests, social upheavals, and the enduring power of human resilience in the face of oppression.
And we're not done yet. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how the ideas of the Enlightenment and the revolutions in North America and Europe sparked movements for independence across Latin America. It's another fascinating chapter in this era of transformative change. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Age of Revolutions. We've journeyed across continents, witnessed empires crumble and new nations rise, but our exploration isn't over yet.
Right, there's a whole other hemisphere where the echoes of revolution reverberated, sparking movements for independence that would reshape the political landscape of Latin America.
It's amazing to think about how those Enlightenment ideals, along with news of the American, French, and Haitian revolutions, traveled across the Atlantic and just ignited this desire for self-determination in Latin America. It's like a chain reaction of revolutionary fervor.
Absolutely. Remember, these weren't isolated events. They were part of a broader global trend towards challenging traditional authority and demanding greater autonomy.
But I imagine the specific circumstances in Latin America, with its own complex social hierarchies and colonial legacies, added unique layers to these independence movements.
You're spot on.
Right.
Let's take Mexico as an example. For centuries, it had been under Spanish colonial rule, with a rigid social structure that placed Creole elites, those born in the Americas of Spanish descent, below peninsulares, those born in Spain.
So even though they shared a Spanish heritage, there was this clear distinction based on birthplace. Sounds like a recipe for resentment.
Oh, yeah, and a desire for greater control over their own destiny.
Exactly. And this resentment, simmering for years, reached a boiling point when Napoleon invaded Spain in 1808, throwing the Spanish monarchy into chaos. This created an opportunity for Creole elites in Mexico to assert their autonomy.
It did.
And then enters Father Miguel Hidalgo, a parish priest. Not exactly the figure you might typically associate with leading a revolution. What made him such a pivotal figure in the Mexican independence movement?
Hidalgo was a charismatic leader. He understood the grievances of the people. He saw the injustices inflicted upon the indigenous population and the lower classes, and he used his position as a priest to rally support for independence. His famous Grito de Dolores, a call to arms, issued on September 16, 1810, marked the beginning of Mexico's war for independence.
So it really was a call to action.
It was.
It's incredible to think about the power of his words to mobilize a nation against colonial rule. It sounds like a truly pivotal moment.
It was Hidalgo's rebellion, while ultimately unsuccessful, sparked a fire that would not be easily extinguished.
Wow.
He was captured and executed by Spanish authorities, but his message of independence had taken root.
So it was a movement that transcended the life of its initial leader, becoming this struggle for liberation embraced by a diverse range of people.
Yes, and other leaders emerged to carry the torch, including Jose Maria Morelos, a former student of Hidalgo who continued the fight for independence.
Okay.
He proved to be a skilled military strategist and a visionary leader who drafted a constitution for an independent Mexico.
It's amazing to see how these revolutionaries not only fought for freedom, but also envisioned the kind of society they wanted to create. But it seems like Mexico's path to independence took some unexpected turns, didn't it?
It did. Agustin de Iturbide, a royalist military officer who had initially fought against the insurgents, switched sides in 1821 and joined forces with the independence movement.
Wow, what a twist.
This alliance proved decisive, and Mexico finally achieved independence that same year.
So it seems like the Mexican independence movement was marked by both ideological fervor and political pragmatism.
You're right. It was a complex and multifaceted movement with different factions vying for power and influence. But ultimately, they shared a common goal: freedom from Spanish rule.
And while Mexico was forging its own path to independence further south, Another charismatic figure was leading a revolutionary movement that would liberate much of South America from Spanish control. I'm talking about Simón Bolívar, often referred to as El Libertador. What made him such a towering figure in Latin American history?
Bolívar was a visionary leader, a skilled military strategist, and a passionate advocate for independence. He believed in the power of ideas to transform societies, and he was deeply influenced by Enlightenment thinkers like Locke and Montesquieu. He dreamed of a united South America free from colonial rule.
So his vision extended beyond simply liberating individual nations. He saw a future where the former Spanish colonies would come together as a unified force. That's a bold and ambitious concept.
It was, and he dedicated his life to achieving that vision. He led daring military campaigns across the Andes, liberating nations like Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia from Spanish rule.
His campaigns sound like something out of an adventure novel: epic battles, treacherous mountain crossings, and unwavering determination. Did he achieve his dream of a unified South America?
Not entirely. While he was successful in liberating several nations, his grand vision of Gran Colombia, a unified state encompassing much of South America, ultimately faltered. Political rivalries and regional differences proved too strong to overcome.
It seems like even in victory there are often challenges and compromises. But even if his grand vision didn't fully materialize, Bolívar's impact on South America was undeniable.
Absolutely. He's revered as a hero throughout Latin America, a symbol of independence and the struggle for self-determination. His legacy continues to inspire movements for social justice and political reform.
So while Mexico and much of South America fought for independence through armed struggle, Brazil's path to nationhood took a rather different route. It's a fascinating story, isn't it?
It is. Brazil's independence was achieved through a series of negotiations and political maneuvers rather than a violent revolution. It's a unique case in the history of Latin American independence.
Can you walk us through how this relatively peaceful transition occurred? It seems like a stark contrast to the turmoil we've seen in other parts of the Americas.
Remember Napoleon's invasion of Portugal that we discussed earlier? Well, when French troops marched towards Lisbon in 1807, the Portuguese royal family, rather than face capture, fled across the Atlantic to Brazil.
So Brazil became this temporary haven for the Portuguese monarchy, a rather unexpected turn of events.
It was, and it had profound consequences for Brazil. The presence of the royal court in Rio de Janeiro transformed the city into a center of power and culture. It also led to significant economic and social changes in Brazil.
It sounds like Brazil, under these unique circumstances, experienced a period of accelerated development and modernization.
You're right. And when Napoleon was defeated and it was safe for the Portuguese royal family to return to Lisbon, the Prince Regent Pedro decided to stay in Brazil.
So he defied his family's expectations and chose to remain in this newly invigorated Brazil. What motivated his decision?
He recognized the growing desire for autonomy in Brazil, and he saw an opportunity to forge a new destiny for himself and for the nation. In 1822, he declared Brazil independent, and he was crowned Emperor Pedro I.
So instead of a bloody revolution, Brazil got this smooth transition to independence led by a member of the Portuguese royal family. It's a remarkable story.
It certainly highlights the diversity of paths these independence movements took. Each one was shaped by its own specific context, but they were all united by a common desire for self-determination and a rejection of colonial rule.
Well, we've journeyed through 3 continents, witnessing empires crumble and new nations rise. It's been a whirlwind of ideas, battles, and dramatic twists and turns.
It's been incredible to explore how these revolutions, despite their differences, were all fueled by those shared Enlightenment ideals: liberty, equality, popular sovereignty. They challenged the old order, reshaped the political map of the world, and left a lasting legacy that continues to inspire us today.
It's given me a whole new perspective on this period and a deeper understanding of how these events continue to resonate in our world.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that history is not just a collection of dates and events. It's a story of human struggle, resilience, and the pursuit of a better world, a story that continues to unfold in our own time.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the age of revolutions. I hope you found it as insightful and thought-provoking as I did.
And remember, this is just a starting point. There's so much more to explore about this fascinating period, so many stories waiting to be uncovered.
I encourage you to keep digging deeper. Read those primary sources, challenge those assumptions, and continue to learn about these incredible events that continue to shape our world today. Thanks for listening.